Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator, and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again for this week's episode of DEI After 5. So every year between August, September, and early November, we as the United States at least get into what we call election season. And depending on who's running or what office is up for election, it becomes a pretty contentious time of year. And it doesn't happen just outside of the workplace. It pours into the workplace. And unfortunately for, this year or for the last couple of years, what we've noticed is those of us that are in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space have seen our industry, the work that we do, on the forefront of the attacks. Right. So we're seeing this anti-DEI effort that is going forward. And so today we're going to talk about that. What does that look like when the politics come into the workplace, and how do we manage and handle that? Or do we even embrace that? And so today our guest is Sara Taylor, who is with Deep Sea Consulting, and she's a specialist in this space. And so Sara, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Sacha.
So for people who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about you and your work?
Absolutely. Well, I actually have 35 years of experience actually as a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. So I've been doing this all of my career. Probably not what lots of folks would expect. For those that are listening and can't see, I'm a white woman. And so most folks wouldn't think, what's a white woman doing in this work for 35 years? I actually, as young as middle school, have been researching and giving presentations about bias and stereotypes and how to work together. So a natural flow into the work that I do. I have been everything from a diversity and leadership specialist to a chief diversity officer, and then started Deep Sea Consulting 22 years ago. So since then have worked across the globe with clients across the globe, mostly in the US though, to make organizations and the leaders and individuals within them more effective, more inclusive, and more representative of their communities. So again, very glad to be here and very glad to join the listeners today.
So Sara, thank you. I mean, I appreciate your depth of experience in this space because so many people kind of fall into this work from different ways. And so, you starting kind of in middle school in this space and asking some of those tough questions, I think is what we really need. Like I find folks that have started in that way tend to approach the work in a different way because they are coming from this perspective of clarity in some instances and curiosity, right? And I think in order to strive in this work, you have to be curious. You can't always be prescriptive. You have to kind of lean into, okay, well, what is the why behind this? And so starting with that curiosity at a young age, I just absolutely appreciate and love. So, when I started the conversation, we were talking about, or I started the show talking about the polarization that is happening in the workplace. And this year, probably more so than any other year that I can recall, not saying that it's never happened, where the DEI industry is literally on the chopping block, right? We've seen legislation passing over the last year and a half or two at the state level. But now it feels like, okay, this election is going to be the make or break for this industry as it is right now. So can you talk to us a little bit about, what you are seeing or noticing kind of in the workplace as it relates to some of this political conversation?
Yeah, and I think that historical context is really important. Um, as I said, I've been in this practice for 35 years. I have never felt such a broad attack on the work that we do. So much so that even just saying DEI is a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what we notice, because we work across industries, and interesting, I was just with a board the other day of a nonprofit, and they said, "Oh, I bet you're seeing lots of corporations that are stepping back." And honestly, in our work, what we see is, yes, certainly, absolutely. There are all kinds of organizations, corporations included, that have said, we were all in after George Floyd's murder, and
Mm-hmm.
then, now we're backing out. So really, organizations that are just doing whatever they're doing because of whatever the flavor is in the
Yep.
world, right?
Yeah.
But where we actually see more significant change is in public sector, government agencies,
Interesting.
where, as you mentioned, there are some jurisdictions where doing this work is actually illegal.
Yeah.
And so when we put out a DEI survey to find out, how does the organization feel about DEI? How inclusive is the workplace? How inclusive is your supervisor? Those kinds of things. We literally can't say DEI.
Yeah.
Try doing a DEI survey without saying DEI.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how we do this work in other parts of the globe. You have to really talk about what the work is instead of using that acronym. Because what we found is that acronym means a whole lot of different things to a whole lot of different people.
Yeah.
So leaning in, most folks across industries are leaning into inclusion and stepping back from diversity, at least on a surface level, or at least
Yeah.
on a public level, I should say, even though they might be doing the work. But it is incredibly disheartening. And I would say, for the first time in my career, pretty scary thinking about what this could mean to the practice. And saying that, if some of your list, because we've got a lot of folks in that are practitioners, if they aren't hooked up to, we have a group of folks that shortly after, oh gosh, let's see, this summer, essentially,
Okay.
uh, that basically came together, DEI practitioners, most of us with decades of experience, that came together to be able to counter this DEI backlash. So
Mm-hmm.
I would love it if folks want to get involved. We can, in the show notes, we can put contacts to that. So if anybody
Absolutely.
wants to get involved on a committee to think about how we put DEI out in social media, or how we counter the 2025 project, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that's wanting to be involved in that, would love to add that to the information for listeners to be able to hook up.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's so fascinating how this work is being attacked. And I think it's being attacked because there's no standard, right? There's
Yes.
not one definition of diversity, of equity, or inclusion. And sadly, I think because of that, it makes it a weaker industry to be
Yes.
able to attack, right? There's no solid ground for us to link arms on.
Yeah.
That being said, I've shared on the show, and I've actually had her as a guest. I have a cousin who, had done this work for 40 years, and just decided she wanted to retire like at 80. Right during COVID, she was like, I don't want to
That's
deal with
enough.
COVID. But she says that the work has never changed. The fight has never changed. What has changed is what we call it.
Yes.
Right. So when we think about civil rights, when we think about affirmative action, when we think about Title IX, when we think about all of these things that have come out of the work, the letters DEI are fairly new.
Yeah.
In this space. And so I think there's so many people that are wedded to those three letters that they're not necessarily focused on the end result. So that's exactly what you were saying. In other countries, what's the end goal that we're trying to accomplish here? What are we trying to create here? What are the inequities that we want to address in this work? And it does not necessarily need to have those letters DEI attached to it. I was talking to someone yesterday, and the work that I do is around psychological safety, and I say building inclusive workplaces where psychological safety is central to the organization, right? Part of their values. And they then asked the question, well, how do you do this DEI work? And I'm like, I sneak in the vegetables.
Yes, I love that.
Right?
That is a great way to say it. Yes.
It's like, I don't have to use these letters, but if I'm talking about, I have not come across anyone that's like, I want to be a bad manager and I want to ostracize half my team. Like nobody ever says that. So how can you show up as a better leader, as a better manager, ensuring that everyone feels valued, seen, heard, and connected?
Yeah.
That's what people are like, yes, that's what I want. I don't have to say diversity, equity, and inclusion in order to get there. So yeah, I'm always sneaking in the vegetables.
I love that, sneaking in the vegetables. I've always said come in through the back door. But I love that. I do want to go back to the standards piece because that's another group that I'm involved in, and we can send that out to the listeners as well. I'm actually chairing the group that is creating standards for DEI. As a part of ASTM, they create standards around everything. Standards for how construction workers make concrete on a road, or how a building is made, or whatever. So I'm co-chairing that. And again, if anybody wants to be involved in that, would love that. But to your point of using terminology, I think that's very true because you're right. There's no one that's going to say, I want to show up to a workplace that really sucks. Right?
Sign me up.
That's going to say, or that's going to show up and say, today, can I be an ogre? Can I offend everybody? No. We want to be effective. We want to be inclusive, and we want to work in an inclusive workplace. So use the terminology that we need to, but continuing to do the work. I'd agree.
Yeah. So what do we do when organizations, there have been several, I'm not going to name names, but there have been several who have publicly backed out of their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts.
Yeah.
And I think that's a misstep. I think it's short-sighted for two reasons. One, yes, you're sending a message externally to, we're not doing it, we're not signing up, but you're sending a message internally to your employees as well, that may be from communities that have been marginalized. You're sending a huge message to them. The other thing that I have noticed with a lot of these companies, we are now in a global marketplace. And so in order to meet the needs of other organizations, or you might have, again, employees and customers in other countries, you need to have some type of cultural competency, which is tied to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's why it's short-sighted, because yes, you are trying to meet the needs of this small, loud group over here, but to what extent are you potentially harming your organization? And so for organizations that have made that decision or are thinking about making that decision, what do they need to be conscious of as these politics kind of come into the workplace? What are some of the things that they need to make sure they have in place so that their employees, that will start there, don't feel ostracized?
Well, I think the main thing for those organizations is they're pretty much deciding to not be competitive, kind of as you mentioned,
Mhm.
because we know that the highest performing teams, this comes from research from the International Management Development Institute, highest performing teams are both diverse and
Mhm.
culturally competent.
Mhm.
So if you set out and say, hey, we're not going to do this stuff, who's going to be attracted, as you mentioned, to that organization? It's not going to be a diverse workforce, right? And it's definitely not going to be a culturally competent workforce. So
Mhm.
what I always say is, for those organizations, and also we see this in educational systems that have had to say, nope, we're not going to, or that choose to say, nope, we're not going to have a diverse student body, or we're not going to teach this stuff. And what I say to that is, then we are doing a fabulous job, absolutely wonderful job at setting up those students and those members of the workforce to be incredibly successful for the workplace of the 1950s.
Yes,
Which
absolutely.
teacher wants to say, that's what I want to do for my students? Which CEO, which leader says,
Mhm.
that's what I want for my workplace? I want it to be the best of the 1950s. We aren't going to pay any attention to what we need to be competitive today, because we're going to be so mired in polarization that we're going to put the blinders on, and we're just going to move forward ineffectively, essentially,
Yeah.
is what they're doing.
You know, and folks that have listened to the show, watch the show, I'm a visual person, right? And so what immediately came to my mind was like the emperor has no clothes. And we get
Absolutely.
into this mindset of, oh, we're going to turn,
Yes.
we're just going to ignore what we see because we are so far, we want to continue down this path and in
Mhm.
this belief. And as someone who was born in another country, who spends a lot of time outside of this country looking in, we have the best idea of ourselves until you get outside this country and see how other
That's
people
right.
really see us,
That's
right?
right. Yes,
And part of
absolutely.
that is education, right? Part of that is understanding that though we do have some of the best universities in
Mhm.
the world, what is happening now with this anti-DEI legislation is weakening what critical thinking looks like at that
Mhm.
collegiate level.
Mhm.
And so again, that competition is down the line, right? You're preparing
Yeah.
for a workforce of yesteryear versus what is happening 10, 20 years from now.
Right.
And so it's just very fascinating to me to, one, look at the demographics of, and then we'll just, use the United States. The demographics of the United States is becoming much more diverse. When
Mhm.
you see people are living longer, so
Mhm.
we have much more age diversity.
Yep.
We have much more race and ethnic diversity, which
Right.
I think part of this anti-DEI effort is to ward that, because they can
Mhm.
control that, can control age. But there's also more individuals with disabilities, visible and invisible, that are now coming into the forefront.
Yep.
So we are becoming a much more diverse, multicultural, multi-ethnic or country,
Yep.
yet we are hindering ourselves from understanding how to operate successfully in those spaces.
Yes. Yes. And what that gets to then is, I mean, think about any other area in our workforce. So we bring someone in, we give them a computer with our specific software that we need. What do? We make sure that they have the competence, the skills to use that software. We
Mm-hmm.
bring someone in to work on a particular machine on our line. What do? We make sure that they have the skills, the competence to use that machine.
Mm-hmm.
Where and when do we stop to say, you know what? We all are working with each other, with people. Have we worked to develop the skill, the competence to work with other people? And that goes back once again to cultural competence.
Yeah.
So there are actually 5 stages of competence. And so, like, literally think, math. Someone that's a elementary school math versus middle school versus high school, 5 levels of math. Same thing, 5 levels of how much we can see how our unconscious is making decisions for us.
Mm.
And then how much we can get in front of that to make more effective decisions and do that on an organizational level as well. And what we know is that the first 3 stages, I'm going to go back to that research that I mentioned earlier. The vast majority of individuals and almost every organization is operating in the first 3 stages where we're not able to be effective, where our unconscious filters are completely in control. And very, very few of us are operating in the latter stages of development. And so I want to bring that to the DEI practice as well, because it's been one of the things for me that's been so frustrating over the last couple of decades is seeing organization after organization not paying attention to this competence and working super hard. We're going to do this. We're going to create these ERGs and this council, and we're going to do this activity and this supplier diversity and this recruitment and all of these kinds of things, but they haven't developed the competence. And so they're doing it from an ineffective stage. And what happens? They spin their wheels, doing
And it
lots
doesn't
of
work.
hard work.
Lots
And lots of hard work, but not getting the outcomes that they need. And so then what do leaders say? Oh yeah, well, this diversity stuff doesn't work anyway. So it's kind of like saying we've got a PhD level math problem, but we're going to put folks that, they're like at a high school level and volunteers from around the organization, and they're going to tell us what we should do for DEI. No, we've got to develop this competence, even ourselves as practitioners. Because just because we're practitioners doesn't mean we've developed this ability to check and challenge our unconscious as it's making decisions.
2 things immediately came to mind when you said that. One, this is how I feel about organizations leaving their DEI efforts to ERGs. Love ERGs. I think that there's a time and a place and a space for employee resource groups. However, I do not believe, to your point, that they have the competence to create the systemic changes.
Absolutely.
Competence or position, right? Positionality to create the change that is necessary within an organization. And so it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy of this isn't going to work. Well, you haven't created a system that will allow it to work. And then the second part of that is, as practitioners, we have to be honest with ourselves on not just our biases, but where we need to continue to educate ourselves. And that is hard to do, especially if you've positioned yourself as this expert in this space, because so many people rely on you and you feel like you have to know all the things. And as a practitioner, I am quick to say, I do not know all the things. However, I have someone in my circle, in my community, that knows more than I do in this space. And I think that that is something that we need to do more of as a community of practitioners, is leaning into other people's specialties. And I'm going to caveat this too, because I think this is important. I think that there are quite a few practitioners that are in this space. I call them practitioners of pain. They got into this space because, again, they haven't done their internal work. And so they have this pain that they're trying to ease and come into this space without having addressed or healed that pain, which then can, so there's a level of competence that comes with that, which then can cause some other issues down the line too. So I know I just said a whole lot, but
actually that, I mean, of course we deal with pain, we deal with trauma differently. But when we come to the work because of that pain and see the work as a fight, of that actually is pretty indicative of just the second stage of development. And so it is, and we do see it all the time. We
Yeah.
do need to do our own work. And I have to go back to your comment about ERGs as well, because I've got a phrase that I use, kind of like your vegetables. How do we?
Mhm.
I sneak in the vegetables, I think is what you say.
Yep.
What I say to lots of organizations that both turn their work over to ERGs or to volunteer councils, volunteer committees.
Hmm.
I always use the analogy of, okay, let's just say you're going to completely overhaul your whole financial system in the organization. Are you going to turn that over to a committee of folks that like to balance their checkbook?
Right.
I'm guessing not. I'm guessing you're going to look for folks that actually have an expertise in finance. And you're not going to push that to folks that just say, oh, this is fun.
Right.
You're going to push it to someone that has experience and expertise. And again, that's what we tend to be lacking. And part of that too is, as you alluded to earlier, we're a very young practice. We're not
Mhm.
old practice like medicine or law.
Right.
We've really only been around. DEI has only been around for a number of decades. And
Yeah.
so
In this form, right? In this
in
form.
this form, yeah,
Yeah.
DEI, all kinds of work for justice and for equity and so forth. But workplace DEI really has only
Hmm.
been around since after the civil rights movement.
Hmm.
And so we do have a lot of work to get the skills as practitioners and make sure that those practitioners have a consistency to the work that we do.
I was on LinkedIn earlier today, and there was a post around how this person phrased it was DEI needs to leave HR and go into marketing. And my response was DEI has been in marketing, right? Multicultural marketing has been around for a long time. It has been usurped by HR and by organizations that feel this is only an employee issue. And so, therefore, HR needs to be the only group that's dealing with it. I had somebody tell me that when I was in corporate. Um, and so I think that's very short sighted as well. And that's part of why we are where we are right now, because this work as an industry has been positioned as an HR, a people thing, right? When it's actually an industry, a community, a customer, a client, and an employee. Like, it is a holistic look at all of the work and how an organization shows up in this space on all of those fronts.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question that I often ask people is, how does DEI show up in your accounting?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, it doesn't. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
really? So who are you giving your donations to? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you outsourcing to? Like,
Absolutely.
and thinking about it from that perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we talk about this polarization of DEI, um, it's focused on, well, I don't want to hear about these things.
Mm-hmm.
We could take training off the table. We're not going to do any more training, but it should be shown, it should be a part of your company's DNA.
Mm-hmm.
It should
Mm-hmm.
be infused in every single aspect of your business, not from a employee butts and seats perspective, but how
Yeah.
are we showing up holistically in this space where we're reaching our customers and clients in the best way possible so that everyone feels valued, seen, heard, and connected to our organization and what we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have to say it I'm going to go back to the first thing you started with, which was the LinkedIn post. It makes me so sad, honestly, when again, it just gets to, we've got to do a better job as practitioners, because the link between marketing and DEI has been around for ages. I
Decades.
remember in 2010, I remember doing a presentation at a DEI conference about the link between marketing and DEI. It might have been new then. It's not new now.
No.
So again, I think we've got to realize when we step into the work that it is an established practice. How do we learn from each other of things that are already happening?
Yeah.
And how do we build our competence so that we really can best serve and we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Absolutely.
The
And I think
wheel.
that's the piece that I'm getting caught up on is people, oh, we have to start from scratch. No, we don't.
Yeah.
No, we don't. This is the importance of understanding history, knowing what has worked and what hasn't worked and where we've been and, all of these things. And, and to your point, I've shared before, with my cousin, she was doing multicultural marketing in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Right. She was doing it for Avon. She was doing it for Macmillan Books.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just selling to Black and brown communities. She was looking at the content in the books to make sure that it was reflective of the actual story of marginalized people within the United States. So this is something that is not brand new. I think that there's this new consciousness that's looking at it from an uneducated set of eyes that just don't understand, that don't know that we've been here before.
Well, and there is the internal marketing communication, if you will, as well.
Oh, yeah.
That you really can't do anything as an organizational change, because to me, that's what DEI is. DEI is organizational change, transformational change.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this work just to do work. I'm doing this work to make significant transformational change.
Yeah.
To do that, you have to have solid communication plans, internal communication plans.
Yeah.
How are we talking about this? How are we making sure everybody is informed? It's not just sending out one email once a year. It is consistent.
Yes.
And using multiple modalities. When Coke decides they come out with a new diet vanilla and caramel flavored Coke, we're hearing about it everywhere. We see the display at the grocery store. We hear the commercials. We see billboards. We've got it everywhere. We have to do the same with our internal communications. That it's just a part of everything that we see and hear. That's what this organization is about. An organization where we are representative, we are diverse, we are welcoming, we are inclusive, we connect, and we're competent in how we do that.
Yes. And with that example, what I love is when we see this new flavor of Coke, as the consumer, we are the last to know, right? Because they had those internal conversations that everyone is on the same page. Everyone knows exactly what they need to know about this new flavor and what makes it different than the last. All of that is communicated internally so that anyone that is asked about it knows how to respond.
That's right.
Right. And it's not this, oh, I don't know, that's not my department. Everyone is in lockstep. So when the consumer, when it comes out into the industry,
that's right,
it's not brand new information. And so I just wanted to tie a bow on what you said, because it is not just the external, but that internal communications and making sure that it's consistent. And, one of the things that I will say to clients is I want you to have a naysayer on whoever that communications team, because they're going to come up with all of well, this isn't going to work because of this. Be able to answer those questions. Be able to have something that you can come back with, because now you're not going to be caught if somebody asks a question that's counter to that. And you're like, oh, we didn't think of that. You need somebody on that team that is going to be that naysayer, that's going to be, oh, this isn't going to work. And you all know who that is within your organizations, right? We all know who that is. That is who you want to be a part, and not ostracize them because they are not on the same, they're not following everybody else.
Right.
In this, that's the diversity of all of this. So Sarah, I want to, do a little bit of a pivot in doing this work. because we could talk for hours and hours and
I
hours
know.
on it. And doing this work, it just takes a lot. So what are the things that you do to fill your cup, to take care of you as
Mm,
you are continuing to talk about, the polarization that's happening, the divisions that are happening kind of in the
mhm,
workplace?
mhm. I'm going to start big picture and then I'm going to get down to some specific
Yeah.
strategies. Me personally, my spirituality is very important. I'm not religious at all, but I'm very spiritual. I spend time in nature every day. These are all things that we know, by the way, from psychological safety and from trauma based work that help any of us, right?
Hmm.
To calm. So I try to every day really center myself in nature, meditate, um, and in actual situations. Deep breathing
Mm.
is incredibly important. And the other thing, I'm going to get to real specifics of polarization and responding to polarization, um, particularly because, again, we learn from this from cultural come back to cultural competence. It keeps
Yeah.
coming up in this conversation. Polarization is actually that second stage of competence.
Hmm.
And the wonderful thing about cultural competence is we can define, okay, this is what it looks like when we've only developed to this particular stage. But then this is also the developmental strategy to move out. So then, even when we find ourselves in those situations of polarization, what can we do?
Right.
And what we know from cultural competence, what advances us in our overall competence, but also in individual situations, individual conversation where it regresses to polarization. What helps is a focus on commonality.
Yeah.
And that may feel icky. It may feel patronizing. It may feel like not enough. But, and in some ways it isn't, because that just gets us to the third of 5 stages.
Right.
But it
Right.
at least gets us to the third and not the second.
Yeah.
So focusing on commonalities and, starting there. A couple of other things that I want to flag because we hear it over and over. In fact, one of my favorite news outlets, I was so disappointed to hear they even have a whole initiative now that is focused on this, which is folks will say, what do we need to do? Well, we just need to turn on the opposite the news channel for the opposite. If I'm on the
Hmm.
left, I'm going to turn on the news channel of the right. If I'm on the right, I'm going to turn on the news channel of the left. And I just need to hear those other opinions. Actually, what we know, because this is developmental, that doesn't help. What
Hmm.
that does is puts us even more firmly in
In our
our own
beliefs.
beliefs.
Yep.
And what
Yep.
we do is stack up arguments that
Yep.
counter that information.
Yep.
And we spend our time just actually getting further and further down into our own beliefs and our own polarization.
Hmm.
So, couple of things that do work. This magical 5-word phrase, can you consider the possibility? So, can you
Hmm.
consider the possibility that when you say that in the workplace, there are others that might take that a lot differently? There are others
Hmm.
that might actually feel some pain when you say that. Uh, can you consider the possibility that when you say that, that actually creates division in the workplace?
Hmm.
So, and I'll tell you, every single time I have used that, I've never heard anybody say, nope, I can't consider the possibility. I mean, everyone says, yeah.
Yeah.
And then usually the second follow up then is, well, then what would that mean to you?
Right.
Well, what would that mean to you then if what you said created division? What would that mean to you if what you said created it was an offense to someone
Hmm.
else? And again, almost always folks will say, well, that would make me pretty sad. I'd feel
Mhm.
pretty bad. Well, then
Mhm.
let's focus on not what, you might have intended, but on that impact of the other person. And the
Yeah.
other piece is for each of us. When we're wanting to just stack up information, when we're wanting to make our point, to pause and be open. It's one of the things you said in the very beginning of the conversation. What can we do to be open and curious? What can we do to see more complexity, not less? What can we do to move away from judgment, not toward it? All of those things help us to move away from polarization. And those are the things that our workplace and our communities are in desperate need of these days.
Yes. 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 It's the question and how you phrase it. Can you consider the possibility? It makes things internalized, like, because whatever you're saying, you're pushing out. Like, I just envision you're throwing information out, and if it hits you, it hits you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Considering the possibility, it's like, okay, what is the reaction,
Yeah.
right? So if that has caused harm,
Yeah.
that's your responsibility. You are responsible for that. And
Exactly.
so it makes you really think about your role. And I said this on another episode, like your role in the community.
Yes.
Is this how you want to show up
Mm-hmm.
in the community? And so it really forces you to really think about, okay, no, that's not how I want to be perceived, or
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't my intention. And so now you're very conscious of what was said or done, and may or may not change how you do it in the future, but at least it may cause pause.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I really love that. I really
Mm-hmm.
love that. Sarah, if
Mm-hmm.
people wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do it?
Best is probably through Deep Sea, our website, Deep Sea Consulting, and that's double E. Being able to observe at a deeper level, deepseaconsulting.com. LinkedIn also is great. On LinkedIn, try to be at least every day. So connecting with me there as well.
Wonderful. Sarah, thank you so much for this conversation. I think that it is needed in this time, and we're getting more and more polarized.
Mm-hmm.
Um Even if it's not election season, I am noticing that it just
Yeah.
permeates
Yeah.
our society right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this need for, as I said on another episode, space and grace, but then also remembering the
Mm-hmm.
humanity. Like, we are all humans that are flawed, and no one is perfect, and we have all of our different opinions and experiences, and that is what makes us work. And
Yeah.
how do we lean into what I see is like those are our strengths,
Yeah.
and versus seeing them as what divides us. Like, no,
Mm-hmm.
these are the things that make us stronger. So thank you
Mm-hmm.
for the work that you
Absolutely.
do, and just helping us have this conversation and challenge ourselves, right? I really
Mm-hmm.
love, can you consider the possibility?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we look at that at the greater picture, consider the possibility of all of this working, what we could
Absolutely.
accomplish.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thanks so much for the listeners joining in. Sasha, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in again this week. As always, you can find us on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast every Tuesday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, have a good one.